You're listening to a podcast from thespoilist.com. Cyberspace, the new frontier. These are the voyages of the podcast First Contact. Its mission? To explore every episode of Star Trek The Next Generation. To seek out new viewers and have new conversations. To boldly view what many have viewed before. Welcome to First Contact, the Star Trek The Next Generation intro cast, where free intrepid explorers go on the adventures of the Enterprise D once again and try to sound upbeat about it. I'm Andrew.
I'm James.
And I'm Alex.
This week we are discussing Conspiracy. It first aired the week of May the 9th, 1988. It was written by Tracy Tormey and Robert Sabaroff and directed by Cliff Bow. James, what's this one all about?
Picard is called to a clandestine meeting of Starfleet's finest who believe an unknown force has taken control of strategic parts of the Federation. The captain is skeptical, but asks Data to analyze communications to verify the story. Ultimately, Picard decides to journey to Earth, where the admirals are acting in an extremely arch manner. And Admiral Quinn really gives the game away when he beats up Riker. It's discovered that weird worm-eating purple scorpion things have body snatched half of Starfleet, but luckily everything can be fixed with phasers.
So Alex, what did you think of Conspiracy?
I thought it was really good, really tense, kept me involved with an excellent turn from Kenneth Branagh as Reinhard Heydrich, and it really gave us an insight into what led to the final solution.
What did you think of the Star Trek The Next Generation episode, Conspiracy?
Oh, that? Yeah, I quite like that as well.
It begins with a joke, and I think we all found it very funny. All the bridge crew clearly found it very funny as well, as it was met with abject silence.
It wasn't a joke at all. He was being deadly serious. He was describing a situation where a man had gone into a very quick acceleration. The woman had fallen over, and she said, "Just you try that in hyperspace, because you wouldn't be able to accelerate more. You'd be in hyperspace." I thought we should try and work out what the start of that joke is.
If you know what the start of that joke is, then please email us at firstcontact@thespoilist.com, an email address that has remained completely unused since we started this podcast. Also, in Star Trek, we have warp drive. Hyperspace would seem to me to be something from Star Wars, and it's never really been mentioned in Star Trek before or since. Obviously, this was used to show Data still isn't quite human, although again, note, nobody else is laughing. But nice to see Brent Spiner doing some android acting. That's always welcome, isn't it?
Yes, another one of those. You know, he's not human. Did you pick up on it? Did you get that the albino man is not human? Yeah, we're just going to signpost it here because we're not sure if you're very clear on it. So we're just going to put it up here in big letters.
Wait here. Data isn't human. Have they established this?
I don't think it's been very clear. I mean, what they've been a lot more clear on is blindness and the total lack of it, because it's a military operation.
And they also talk about the fragrant planet bathed in beautiful oceans. And you know from the second they mention it that they're going to end up on a planet with either some dirt or some rocks, or some rocks and dirt.
Well, they do mention this planet. It seems they're trying to head once again for shore leave, and I'm pretty sure it's been every second episode in Star Trek The Next Generation where they have attempted to head for shore leave of some kind.
Are they just awarded shore leave whenever a member of the crew dies? Or they have some traumatic experience, because they're racking up a lot of loo time.
A member of the crew has died? Who was that?
Oh, some red shirt. What you were saying before about, it's going to be a dirt planet. Actually, when I heard them saying that they're going to go to this place for a nice swim, oceanic environment, the minute they said that, I thought, well, we're not visiting that planet this time then.
No, you're quite right. And of course, Worf, he mentions he doesn't want to go to that planet because swimming is too much like bathing. Do Klingons not wash? Is that a thing now? Does Worf really stink?
And is that not quite antisocial on crowded bridge?
Maybe Klingons just have a natural antiperspirant.
Maybe they do. That's a very good point and one I hadn't considered. And isn't life so wonderfully diverse? I thought it was actually quite an effective teaser. Yes, we do have the slightly forced banter on the bridge, but then something happens and it really does up the tension. I'm not quite sure how shifts work, because Picard is sleeping while the entire rest of the sort of A-team are on the bridge. Do they never sleep? Have they got to stay up just in case? But anyway, yes, it does seem like the stakes have been raised effectively, which is probably how a teaser should end. I quite like that.
Yeah, it's actually the most effective teaser that I think we've had in this whole series so far. And calling back onto something a few episodes ago, great. There should have been more of it, let's be perfectly honest.
Yes, and then as you've mentioned, the planet, or the planetoids that they go to, an abandoned mining colony, rocks and dirt. But for the first time, and I assume it is a redress of the Planet Hell set, it's nicely lit, it's shadowed. I think this is the best looking version of Planet Hell we have ever had.
Well, and part of that is probably that they're doing it as a cave, so everything's covered, and that horrible backdrop is only just out at the mouth of the cave. It's done really nicely. My God, who thought that set could be made to look nice?
It just goes to show that it's not necessarily the set that's bad, it's just the context in which it's used. It shouldn't be used every week to be jungle planet, ocean planet, desert planet, whatever planet they have. If it's used as quarry planet, which science fiction always does so well, then great, well done, you finally found a use for that set.
If only they went to quarry planets every week.
I'm sure that exists on the A247. It's just a supply shop that sells lots of pickaxes.
I like how they do arrive at the rendezvous and they say, there's 3 other ships here. Only our special effects budget doesn't actually stretch to showing you 3 other ships, so we'll just go down to the planet after an establishing shot of the Enterprise.
I quite love the fact that there's this secret meeting, and Picard, you mustn't tell anyone that you're coming on this meeting. Don't tell a soul. Don't give any clue that that's what you're doing. And, the crew won't notice at all that we're just diverting our course entirely, going to this strange planet where there's several other Federation ships. And then Picard beams off on his own. That's not suspicious behaviour in the slightest.
No, nobody would be reporting that in their Federation blogs.
Captain's personal log. The secret meeting between Starfleet captains went well. I think that there's some weird conspiracy going on, but I'm not sure. I hope nobody listens to this.
Picard also voicing our opinions on the series so far. What the hell is going on here? We've asked ourselves that so many, many times.
It is almost a shame that it isn't a bit more plot arc driven, because this conspiracy, although it has been foreshadowed in Coming of Age, very nicely done, well done writers for knowing where you were going in a few episodes' time, you could have been building elements of this up throughout the season. There could have been mysterious communications or mysterious disappearances, and it would have been all the more effective. All credit to the writers and directors of this episode, that it actually does work out incredibly well and is incredibly tense, even though it is clearly a story condensed to a single space.
That's true. That you actually have an interesting thing that's picking up on something from earlier. The thing that I find a great shame is that you have this idea of people being replaced and something you don't necessarily notice at first until they drop an odd detail. That's the kind of thing that would have been fantastic to feed through the series. That would have been great. Just the odd things occasionally. And how much better would it have been if, as time had gone by, Picard had started to realise that something was wrong, rather than just beaming down to the planet on this episode, being told, and then going, well, I suppose it must be true. What if he'd come to work it out over the course of a season? I mean, I realise, perhaps that's not the way that television series were working at the time, but I mean, that's such a lost opportunity.
And again, when you think that we have had to kill off one of the series regulars, imagine if for one of these episodes that she disappeared, she'd been at a special Starfleet conference, and then had returned, and he had to kill his own security officer because she had been compromised by an alien creature. Perhaps a more effective and fitting death for a regular than just being killed in such a meaningless and arbitrary way.
Wait here. A character has been killed off.
Argyle. That's why you've not seen him.
He was promoted to security officer.
And then murdered. Classic episode. We should say, though, that while there is a very strong argument that this should have been seeded much earlier, and it would have made this episode all the better for it, this is still a very good episode. This is the first episode, I think, that I watched from start to finish and was totally engaged with from start to finish. Now, maybe that's feeding into the kind of science fiction that I tend to like. I tend to like a broad spectrum. I tend to like it when it's quite schlocky, but then I also quite like quite introspective stuff, Philip K. Dick and whatnot. Maybe it just says that I like Star Trek when it's a bit more like this. It's sort of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Yeah, that. I quite like that. Simple plot, but done well. It would have been better if they'd done it earlier, but that's an issue with the rest of the series. In this episode, I thought it worked quite well.
At the same time, I think it would have been better as a two-parter as well, because I think the pacing is off. I think you get the first 20-25 minutes, and it's building up to something, and then the last 15 minutes feel like they rush to the end.
It does, actually, to me, it has the feel of a season finale about it. It is resolving something that's come up before. We've got returning characters in Quinn and Remick. So it certainly felt a lot more like a season finale, even though we haven't been building up to it much. But it did feel, right, that's one avenue finished, and they've got a bit of a cliffhanger at the end as well.
I'm sure that'll get resolved.
Well, I mean, that's true. Even if you took this whole episode as part one of a two-parter, that's a good cliffhanger for a second part. And then your second part is they realise that the message is being beamed out, and then all of the little bug insects are coming in. That's a good end of series two-parter. That would have been fine. Okay, the first episode would have still been a little bit rushed, but yeah, a shame. As I say, maybe it's just, that's not the way that they wanted to make a series at the time. They didn't think people would necessarily watch week in, week out, so they didn't want a running plot. But even then, that argument is sort of somewhat sullied by the fact that this is picking up on a plot line from Coming of Age. And if you hadn't seen that, it would have been a little confusing at the start. Okay, you can get by without, but seeding it throughout the episodes would have been fine. It wouldn't have created an issue. I really don't think it would have.
No, and it would be such a small element of an episode. It would just be the odd thing. It wouldn't need to detract from, your alien planet of the week either. But I think at this stage, the turnover in writers was so great that we got any kind of continuity at all. It is quite incredible.
And I think I do think that oftentimes you see with Star Trek, they don't like season-spanning storylines. It's only rarely when shows don't have much to lose that they start feeling like they can do a season-spanning storyline. Deep Space Nine became more serialized, and Enterprise up to Season 2 was just individual storylines. Then they realised they're probably going to get cancelled soon. So for the next 2 seasons, it was either a season-spanning storyline or 2 and 3 parters. So I think with Star Trek, they've remained safe and just did one-part episodes when they were successful.
You know, there's no reason that you can't do that. I mean, I quite like having some form of arc, which is just very loosely seeded, but, you know, there's no reason that you can't do that. I think the issue was that with the plot in this episode, that specific thing of people acting out of character, it's that particular storyline would have worked better if it had been done over time. If you'd had passing conversations between Dr. Crusher and Picard about in the last episode or something, oh, you remember this thing with your husband? No? Oh, I must have forgotten. Yeah, that sort of thing. Just setting in mind that something's not quite right.
Overall, this episode has some really nice directorial flourishes. We mentioned some of the lighting on Planet Hell set as well, but what I noticed was a great transition from the back of the laptop onto data, from black screen to light. It does seem very much a show that is finding its confidence and its voice by this stage.
Yeah, right at the end.
Fair enough, it took a season to get there, but thank goodness that sort of momentum didn't get derailed by the writer's strike.
Well, I mean, and also one thing that's worth saying, this is the point where the series has found its feet, I would say. Yes, I would agree. Which makes this the perfect time to do an episode with people acting out of character. And there could have been more played upon with that. Not the second episode of your series.
The destruction of the Ambassador-class warship. Again, no special effects to actually show destruction, but the debris, it looked a lot like sort of scrunched up bits of paper floating in space.
No wonder the ship blew up.
Do you know why the ship fell? Yes, the mass incompetence of the captain. I bet it was. He was flying a paper ship.
And to me, having watched the crew of the Enterprise for the last year, I could believe mass incompetence could actually cause the destruction of a ship at some point. If we just think, very recently, Skin of Evil, they reinserted the dilithium crystals and they hadn't been repolished properly yet.
Just thinking back to that scene where they're discussing that, the whole series of events in Starfleet headquarters, which I have to admit was not a location that I expected to see in this first series, and obviously with familiarity with it from the films, I was quite pleased to see it, and actually that also added to that sort of end of season feeling, spanning quite a few locations. That was great. But was it just me, or was it never explained why it's so quiet there? I mean, I get it. I get that the 3 people, they're all, they've all been taken over by the parasites and whatnot. But why are there then no other people in the building? Has that not raised suspicions with anyone that all of these admirals are saying, we'll have no one in the building anymore? Like some creepy man in your village. You can't go into that garden. You haven't seen Lucy for 3 years. Don't go into the basement.
Well, you see, everybody's out exploring the galaxy. Or they're on a trip to Pacifica.
Obviously, practical considerations come into play, and they couldn't afford that many extras. So, yeah, it's all because of the conspiracy. That's fine. While it does add quite a nice texture to actually see Earth and have different locations, they mentioned right at the start they've been on the Outer Rim. It does seem they almost instantaneously arrive at Earth. A journey, I imagine, with where they are, should take a considerable amount of time. But again, because you're so involved in the plot and the episode, that's only something you think of afterwards. If you're enjoying the episode, it actually doesn't matter, and that's a good sign, and it only really comes into play with massive over-analysis of weirdos.
Well, I think there is actually a good point there, in as much as when those kind of errors have come up in other episodes, we have been a lot more quick to be a lot more critical of it, and we haven't been this time. That is telling. That says we enjoyed this episode. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are parts of the episode that are questionable, some of the effects, and we'll get to that. But you know what? At least for the first time, I felt like this was trying a lot more than a lot of other episodes. It didn't quite reach where it was trying to reach to, but I admired the fact that it was trying.
Going back to the criticism of the ship not taking very long to get back to it, I think that's just a trope of all sci-fi. It's really, space is as big as it needs to be in the episode.
It's very true. And it is something, some people have complained about in the new Star Trek movies and the J.J. Abrams movies, that you can get to Klingon or Vulcan in 10 seconds, you just push the warp drive and it goes. But clearly that's something that Star Trek has been doing for a very long time.
Is it Star Trek 5 where they go to the centre of the universe in about 10 minutes?
It's movie time, it's TV time. We don't actually know how long it's taken. We just know that these are the important points of the story, and that's it, I suppose. If you're annoyed by that, then you're outside of the story and you're not really paying attention. It's important to see Earth. It's important to see the very heart of the Federation being changed by these parasites, which maybe we should talk about some more.
I love stop motion animation, and I'm willing to bet that that's a feeling between all three of us. That well done stop motion animation is great. It's really good. Anything that Aardman does looks great. It has a unique look. It's fantastic. The problem with stop motion is when you rush it, as obviously happened here because they have a limited schedule, then it looks very bad very quickly. I mean, it's not Pingu, is it? And that's something that I think we can all be thankful for.
It is a Wallace and Gromit reject.
It does really... It ages it badly, and, as you say, when something is well crafted with great luck, it might not look photoreal, like Ray Harryhausen stuff. You can tell it's stop motion, but there's so much love and effort, and it works so well. You can forgive it, but here, essentially, we've got something that pretty much has, two movements. It's like an 8-bit computer game, and they've animated it in such a crude way that it does detract a little bit. I mean, the prop itself, it's fine. The colour I might question slightly, but once you stop motion it in that way, it looks nothing other than plastic.
Colour aside, as you say, I think the thing itself looks perfectly fine. I think it's a little large. If I had to have a criticism, when Remix ingesting it is, I mean, aside from the fact that you've had the stop motion and then suddenly this static thing that he starts waggling his tongue around, it's quite obvious the transition. It is a bit too large, and for a parasite it would make more sense to me if it was smaller. But I think the shape of it, it's repulsive enough. It does the job it needs to.
A little bit earlier on, Riker took so long to realise that Quinn was acting out of the ordinary. Picard was about to transport over to the Admirals, and Riker was so adamant that Quinn wasn't acting odd because he's an Admiral and they're allowed to be a bit weird.
The section with Quinn, it was fine. I don't think they were probably explicit enough in him acting oddly, although they more than made up for that later on. There should have been one specific detail that, triggered Picard, because I don't know Quinn that well. We've seen him in one episode before where he seemed fine, but there didn't seem to be anything particularly off about his behaviour here. It was, sure, someone who knows him might know it's different, but as an audience member, I need to also feel that a little bit, I think.
That is a good point, in as much as when you had it earlier with misplaced details, that is a really good way of, someone is not all they seem. But to have the man who said he was weary of life suddenly bounding on of, oh no, I'm happy. How about I do you a little jig? That's too much. That's obvious that there's something wrong.
And then it does seem quite unprovoked to me that he just starts beating the crap out of Riker. It seems he's sort of playing his hand a little too soon to be attacking the first officer of the Enterprise with a full crew complement on board. It doesn't seem like he really needed to do that.
He probably didn't need to keep opening the bloody case and looking at the sodding thing. What's in your suspicious case there? Oh, nothing. Looks like something suspicious. Nah.
I like Riker's just being hit and on the ground and looking up in a surprised manner face.
That was the campest fight choreography I've ever seen. It was like something out of The Naked Gun. It was ridiculous. There was legs going up at angles that I'm fairly certain are not possible.
Which has been quite a common thread for Riker, really, hasn't it?
Very, very good.
If we had to make a criticism of the episode, the stop motion is an easy target, and I can overlook that a lot easier than I can overlook this fight scene. This fight scene was straight out of the 60s version of the show, and it wasn't good. It really wasn't good, and it should have been spotted that was not going to play well. And also, I just watched it and thought, use the phaser. There is no excuse for you not to be using the phaser. Also, this seems to happen quite a lot. Do you not think that by this point someone might have considered that having exclusively glass tables is a bad idea? This is why we can't have nice things.
And not only does he fall into it, but later on, when Worf picks him up, he then drops him again back into the smashed glass. Oh, and once again, our all-powerful Klingon warrior gets beaten up, so let's just count how many times now. So, any other problems with this episode then?
There is one part of the effects that's questionable, which is the moment when the episode decides to turn into Raiders of the Lost Ark.
It's incredibly disturbing. I want to know what setting they had on the phaser. Was it looking into the eyes of God setting?
I always imagine that's what it would be like if you just stared into a hairdryer for 5 hours.
Curiously enough, when this was shown in the UK on BBC Two, that segment was quite heavily edited as it was considered too disturbing for Star Trek's audience.
It's just out of nowhere. There's no warning that that's about to happen. They just shoot a man in the face.
And his face melts, and inside him is the most disgusting Muppet you have ever seen.
I think, especially the way that, at least in Raiders of the Lost Ark, it's a slow melt. In this case, it was just, they shoot him in the face, suddenly all the flesh disappears, and you have this grinning face sort of sat there going, ah! Before it explodes. It's Garth Marenghi.
Well, to be fair to Picard and Riker, if anybody ever tells you they want peaceful coexistence while their neck bulges, I wouldn't believe them. I think there's something suspect there.
And that's why Brian Blessed has never been made into a peace envoy.
Actually, that's quite a nice special effect. After we've got past the dodgy stop motion, what we see some good old-fashioned latex bulging, which is something we've only seen with Riker up to now. So let's shake out our brains and see what falls out in the section we call Quickfire.
Quickfire.
Aye, sir. Full impulse. Do you think anyone would object to our arriving ahead of schedule? I'm willing to guess that that's the first time that Riker's ever been concerned about being premature.
Georgie says, if I could see, I'd be seeing stars. That's good. Let's draw attention to the fact that Georgie can't see. Something which has been ignored for far too many episodes.
Also, I get he can't see through his eyes, but he can see. He manages to carry out his job. He has a visor that allows him to. He can see stars. His blindness is not an excuse in this situation for a sick day.
Some self-aware humour for once, which is brilliant. The computer saying to Data, "Thank you, sir, I comprehend," when he's prattling on. That's nice. That's actually the first decent joke I think they've had in Star Trek The Next Generation.
That's true. It's nice to have us laughing at something intentionally.
Wesley's absent once again, which is strange given how big a part he played in Coming of Age, but I think you can quite clearly see, with Tasha gone and Wesley not in it, this version of the crew actually works fairly well.
Yeah, this is the optimal amount of cast. If it had been this from the start, we may have not had some of the issues that we've had up until now.
Well, let's just hope they don't introduce 2 new cast members next season. The chair that Remick is sitting in is the same chair as the wheelchair used by Jameson in Too Short a Season.
I loved the way he spun around. It was like he was a judge on The Voice, and Picard and Riker had just done a particularly strong number. What's the strategic importance of Dr. Crusher, especially? Why not Riker? Why not Picard? Why get Crusher to infiltrate, first of all?
They just like the imposing name. Crusher. Crusher.
Well, it makes sense that Crusher could then implant the Scorpions into everybody else in the ship just by giving them a routine checkup.
But if they wanted someone who has, valuable experience in giving people infestations, they should be looking at the first officer.
That's that episode over, and we'll be back once again for our season finale with the Neutral Zone. We're all looking forward to that. But for now, goodbye.
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 Wait here. A character has been killed off.
Argyle. That's why you've not seen him.
Argyle was promoted to security officer.
And then murdered.
I can't believe you forgot about that. It was a key element.
Classic episode.
Yes, the Argyle Factor. I mean, what a wonderful title as well.
The Argyle Factor.
I thought it was disgusting, really, though, the way that they just took that script from Doctor Who, from the Armageddon Factor, and just replaced all of the mentions of Romana with Argyle. Yeah, and they never gave any indication as to where this key to time plot had come from. It just suddenly appeared out of nowhere. Lazy. That's what I'm saying. Lazy writing. Black Guardian. What is this shit?
No, that's Code of Honor.
That's got to go in.